All right, well, as we continue to try to get our mind around understanding the big picture of the Bible, what I want to do now is actually start to look at the storyline of the Bible in these next few videos. And we've spent some time in the first several videos here talking about some of the kind of technical side of the Bible, talking about the content and the authorship and genres and so forth. And that's very important foundational information. But now, over the next several videos, we actually want to get into what actually happens in the Bible. What is the storyline of the Bible? And, that's an important question. And sometimes the Bible can seem very overwhelming because it does cover a large span of history, and there's so much to it and so many stories, and how does it all fit together? Well, hopefully, as we look at these next few videos, it will help you to get your mind around just how the storyline and the flow of the Bible really go. And the way we're going to do that is to actually break the Bible down into four main acts. Sort of think of it like a play or a movie where there are main acts in that movie. And I think these main acts will help us to sort of divide the Bible storyline up in such a way that it makes a little more sense. And so we're going to begin that now, looking at the first act of the Bible, Act 1, which is what we're going to call beginnings. And that makes sense because the first act of the Bible is going to cover what happens at the very beginning of everything that we have. Now, this whole first act of the Bible called Beginnings, it takes place in the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, in the first 11 chapters, Genesis 1 through 11. And this is actually a relatively very small section of Scripture, but it contains a huge amount of the storyline. We're going to see in future acts, they cover hundreds of chapters in the Bible, and this act, Act 1, only covers 11 chapters. But the reason why this first act is so important, even though it's a relatively small act in terms of the number of chapters, is it is absolutely foundational to understanding the whole rest of the Bible. Everything that we're going to see in the coming acts flows out of what we're going to discover about God in this first act. And so don't be deceived. While it's only 11 chapters, it is incredibly important. And what we're going to do, like in every act of a play, that usually is broken down into several scenes. And so in each act, we're going to look at a couple different scenes. And so in Act 1, the big picture is beginnings, but the first scene we're going to look at, Scene 1, is all about creation. Now, the Bible begins with this very profound statement in its opening words. It says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." And that sets out really the theme of the whole beginning act of the Bible, Act 1, and that is that God created everything. God is the creator of everything. It goes on to describe how God creates light and dark, and he creates the world and water, and he separates land from water, and then he's going to create plants and animals and everything in heavens and on earth. Everything seen and unseen, God is the creator. And that's really one of the big themes of this scene, is that God is behind everything. God is the creator of all things. There is nothing that exists that wasn't created by God. But then as we move on, we're going to see not only did God create everything, but then he took all that he had made and he brings order to it. He begins to order things, separating light from dark and land from sea, and he puts animals in their place, and he is a God of order, and we see him systematically going through his creation, and he is bringing order to everything. And what we see is that after God has created all things and brought order to all things, he makes this very profound statement in Genesis 1:25. It says he sees everything that he's made so far, and he says, "And it was good." And that's a great indicator to us that God was pleased with his creation. But as we keep reading, we discover that God wasn't quite done yet. Creation was good, but it wasn't yet complete. And so we read that God went on to bring his creation to a great climax, the great pinnacle, and that is when he created you and me. He creates man and woman. And now, I love what it says in Genesis 1:31, no longer was creation good. Now God says, "Behold, God saw all that he made, and it was very good." Now that we were in creation, now God looked at all that he had made, including us, the very climax of creation, and he says, "It is very good." Now, why would God say that it was very good now that we're in it? And that's because God wasn't completely satisfied with his creation until we were in it. And this teaches us something incredibly important about God and his relationship to us, and that is that God desires to be in a relationship with us. Again, when he saw us, he said, now it is very good. And God created us to be in relationship with him. And in fact, as you look at the early chapters of Genesis, you get this beautiful picture of the Garden of Eden. And that is a picture of God's plan for us, not only to experience all of his goodness, but for us to be able to relate to him in a personal way and to walk with him and connect with him. That is God's desire for us, to be in relationship with him. So this first scene of Act 1 is very short, only a couple chapters, but it's very important because we begin to understand the very fundamental nature of who we are as human beings, that we were created by God and that we were created to be in relationship with him. So why don't you go ahead and pause now and take a look at these questions and talk about them as a group.